"Come on, you bastards," Kira snarled, her voice raw and rasping, every syllable tasting of blood. Her pulse rifle trembled in her grip, slick with violet fluid that wasn't all her own. Her armor hung in tatters, rents across her shoulder and thigh where mandibles had found flesh. Still, she stood tall as her battered frame allowed, planted against the jagged curve of a collapsed bulkhead. Twin suns glaring down like merciless eyes. Heat shimmered over the skeletal remains of what had once been a proud Confederation outpost. Now it was a graveyard of twisted durasteel and scorched stone, walls split like shattered bones, the air rank with smoke and the metallic tang of alien ichor. Vultures would have circled on other worlds. Here, it was Rian Raiders, 6 of them. Insectoid bodies slick with greenish gore, their segmented limbs twitching with hunger and anticipation. They moved slow, savoring the kill, mandibles clicking like knives on glass. Kira spat crimson on the sand and forced a grin that felt like broken glass across her lips. "I've still got plenty left for you." A lie, and they all knew it. Her rifle's power cell was a dull orange, warning her she had 2 shots left, maybe 3 if she throttled the charge. 2 shots against 6 enemies, and her body was breaking down with every shallow breath. "Female bleeds pretty," one hissed in broken standard, compound eyes glittering with amusement. "Take her alive, worth more." Her hearts pounded like war drums in her chest. She shifted her weight, pressing her back against the curved husk of an old water reservoir, her last shield, her last stand. There was no cavalry coming. The nearest Confederation relay was light years away, and her distress beacon had been broadcasting into the void for 3 days without answer. This was the end. The lead. Rian stepped closer, serrated blade glinting in the sun's glare. "Not your choice, red meat," it rasped. Kira's finger tightened on the trigger, ready to spend her last rounds and go down fighting. If she was going to die, it would be on her feet, not crawling, not screaming. A crack split the air like the wrath of a god. For one disorienting instant, she thought it was thunder, but the cloudless sky mocked her hope. The lead Rayon's head burst in a fountain of green, its twitching carcass collapsing in the dust. The others froze, chittering in alarm, eyes swiveling wildly. Another crack. Another raider crumpled, twitching spasms shaking its limbs. The remaining 4 broke formation, spinning toward the sound. Kira followed their gaze, her own breath catching. Through the boiling heat haze of the wastes, a figure approached, tall, broad-shouldered, clad in black armor, traced with glowing blue veins of energy. A helmet retracted with a hiss, revealing a face she didn't recognize. Features cut from some primitive myth, jaw shadowed with stubble and eyes, glinting like tempered steel. In his hands was a weapon Kira knew only from archives, a ballistic rifle, brutal and simple, spitting thunder in a world of plasma and phase fire. Another shot cracked, and another raider went down screaming, ichor painting the sand. The survivors panicked, firing wildly. Bolts of green energy hammered his armor, dissipating in flares of light. He didn't flinch. He moved with the calm of inevitability, shouldering the rifle and sending death with every squeeze of the trigger. 3 shots, 3 corpses. Silence fell like a dropped blade. Kira stood frozen, her rifle still raised, her mind reeling. The man strode closer, dust curling around his boots, the last tendrils of smoke whispering from his weapon's barrel. He slung it over his back with the same ease she might holster a sidearm, his gaze settling on her with something like quiet amusement. "You fought well," he said, voice deep, rough-edged, carrying an accent she couldn't place. He nodded toward her trembling hands. "But now?" His lips curled into a half-smile as he stopped a few paces away, blue circuitry glowing faintly across his chest plate like veins of lightning. "You're not alone." And for the first time in 3 days of hell, Kira Terse let herself breathe. Asterisk, the suns bled heat across the sky as silence settled over the battlefield. Dust swirled in lazy spirals where the last raider fell, green ichor seeping into fractured stone. Kira stayed pressed against the warped bulkhead, her rifle still raised. Though her arms trembled so badly, the barrel wavered. Her training screamed move, reload, find cover, but there was nowhere to go. There was only him. The human stopped a few paces away, the black armor that covered him hissing softly as it vented heat. Thin blue veins of light pulsed across its surface, tracing lines like a living thing. He moved with a predator's calm, no-wasted motion, no visible strain, though he just killed 6 Rian, warriors faster than a seasoned strike team could blink. Kira dragged in a breath that burned her throat. You're human. The word tasted strange after months without seeing one of his kind. Last time I checked, he replied easily, lowering his rifle. It was primitive and old ballistic design, but in his hands, it had become something terrifyingly effective. He slung it over one shoulder with practiced ease. And you, Lieutenant Kira Terse, of the Confederation Scout Corps. His mouth quirked in a smile that wasn't quite smug. Your distress beacon's been crying for help for 3 days. Her heart's clenched. The beacon. So someone had heard it after all. She tightened her grip on the rifle. How do you know my name? His gaze flicked to the device on her wrist, then back to her eyes. Your signal included identification data. Standard procedure, isn't it? He reached for something on his belt and crouched beside her, slow and deliberate, like a man approaching a wounded predator. Easy, I'm not here to hurt you. The scent of scorched sand and blood clung to the air as Kira stared at him, every muscle coiled tight. Humans weren't supposed to be in this sector. The Confederation had locked it down after the first wave of raids. And yet, here he was calm, armored, alive while her squad lay dead miles back in the wastes. Not here to hurt me, she echoed, bitter laughter bubbling up despite the iron band around her chest. You're armed to the teeth, human. You've killed more in 2 minutes than my team did in 2 days. Forgive me if I'm skeptical. His smile faded. You're bleeding out. The blunt words cut through her defiance. He popped the seal on a medkit, pulling out a sleek cylinder of gel that shimmered faintly blue. Let me help, or you'll be a corpse before the sun set. Kira opened her mouth to snap a retort, but pain flared through her side, white-hot and merciless. Her pulse rifle slipped from nerveless fingers, clattering against the stone. She sagged back against the bulkhead, glaring up at him as he moved closer. Touch me without consent, she ground out, and I'll break your jaw. His lips twitched. Fair enough. Then his hands strong, steady, warm even through the armor's gauntlets, were unfastening the scorched plates across her abdomen. He worked quickly, efficiently, spreading the gel over the ragged wound, slashing across her side. Cool relief swept through her nerves, drowning the burn in a numbing chill. Kira sucked in a breath, her heart's slowing fractionally. Your medical training is impressive. Necessity, he said, voice low, focused. I don't like dying. Don't like others doing it either. His eyes lifted, gray and unreadable. Can you stand? Pride flared, sharp and stupid. I can walk. She shoved against the bulkhead, teeth gritted as her legs threatened to fold. Pain roared back like fire under her skin. A sigh brushed her ear. Then, without asking, his arm swept her up effortless, like she weighed nothing. Put me down, she hissed, struggling against his grip. This is undignified. Dignities. Overrated when you're leaking blood, he said dryly, adjusting her in his hold as he started toward the horizon. The twin suns cast his shadow long and sharp across the sand, his armor catching the light like molten obsidian. Besides, he added, glancing down at her with that infuriating half-smile, Nobody's here to see. Kira stilled, too weak to fight, too proud to admit the warmth of his chest felt. Steady. Safe. Her head tilted, just enough to glimpse his jawline under the stubble, the faint scar above one brow. Not what she'd expected from a human mercenary. Not what she'd expected at all. Name, she rasped after a long moment. Dex, he said without hesitation. Dex Morgan. She let the syllables settle in her mind like a strange new weapon. Dex. The man who walked through fire and thunder, and for reasons she didn't yet understand, chose not to leave her behind. The heat shimmered ahead, and as they crested a ridge, his ship rose from the sands like a dark sentinel. Sleek, scarred, and silent. For a heartbeat, hope flickered in Kira's chest. Then she saw them. Figures circling the landing Gear 8, maybe 9 Rian raiders, their exoskeletons glinting in the dying light. Dex muttered something sharp and guttural under his breath as he set her down behind a jagged outcrop. His rifle slid into his hands with lethal familiarity. "Friends of yours?" he asked. Kira's jaw tightened. Not even close. His grin was a blade in the dusk. Good. Makes this easier. The suns dipped lower, shadows stretching long across the sand. And as the first shot cracked like thunder, Kira realized one truth with absolute clarity. This wasn't over. The first shot tore through the silence like a thunderclap. A Rian raider jerked backward, green ichor spraying across the scorched hull of Dex's ship. Before the corpse hit the ground, Dex fired again, his ballistic rifle barking like an angry god, each round slamming home with brutal precision. Kira flattened against the jagged outcrop, pulse pounding in her ears. Her body screamed in protest, but the surge of adrenaline burned away hesitation. She clawed for the compact pistol Dex shoved into her hands. A human design, lighter than Confederation models, but vicious in close quarters. "Cover me," Dex snapped, voice clipped, no trace of the lazy confidence from moments before. He was all steel now, his armor glowing faintly as he vaulted the boulder and sprinted low toward the ship, rifle roaring in measured bursts. Kira gritted her teeth and followed, forcing her legs into motion, despite the pain slicing through her thigh. She fired in controlled bursts, each shot cracking out like punctuation marks in the chaos. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel of smoke, alien screeches, and the rhythmic thud of Dex's boots pounding against stone. 3 raiders broke cover, scuttling fast across the sand, mandibles clacking like bone saws. Kira dropped 2 with precise chest shots, the recoil biting her weakened arms, but the third lunged, blade flashing in the sunlight. She twisted, too slow, certain the strike would split her from shoulder to hip. The creature stopped dead. Mid-lunge, its body convulsing. A knife jutted from the joint, where its head met its thorax, buried to the hilt. Behind it, Dex ripped the blade free, his movements fluid, lethal, almost beautiful in their precision. "You good?" He barked without breaking stride. "Better than them," she shot back, even as blood seeped hot down her leg. They reached the ship's ramp in tandem, ducking under a hail of green plasma fire that scorched deep craters into the sand. Dex slammed his hand onto a control pad. The ramp groaned open just enough for them to dive inside, rolling hard across the deck. The hatch sealed with a hiss. Silence crashed down, heavy and sudden, broken only by the pounding of Kira's hearts and Dex's ragged breath. For a moment, they just stared at each other, 2 warriors streaked with blood, dust clinging to their armor like second skin. Dex's gray eyes burned in the dim light, sharp as a blade edge. Then he turned away, ripping off his helmet and tossing it onto a bulkhead hook with a clang. "Turrets online," he muttered, fingers flying across a console. Outside, automated defenses whirred to life, heavy cannons swinging into position. A muffled thud rattled the deck as the first turret spat fire, reducing Arian to ash in an instant. Kira slumped against a wall, forcing air into her lungs. The gel Dex had applied earlier dulled the worst of the agony, but every muscle trembled, like overstrung wire. She pressed a hand to her side and winced at the tacky warmth still seeping through. "Take it off," Dex said without looking at her dot. Her eyes snapped up, sharp. "Excuse me? Your armor." He glanced over his shoulder, jaw tight, expression unreadable. "I can't treat you properly unless I see what I'm working with. Unless you'd rather bleed out on my deck." The retort died in her throat, because the truth was in his tone flat, urgent, leaving no room for argument. She exhaled slowly, then began unfastening the shattered plates across her torso, fingers clumsy from exhaustion. The top section clanged to the floor, leaving her in a compression garment soaked through with violet blood. Dex crouched beside her, medkit open, hands steady despite the streaks of gore across his knuckles. He worked in silence, cleaning and sealing the gash along her ribs with practiced efficiency. The cooling gel stung like ice before the numbing agent sank deep. "You're reckless," he said finally, his voice low. Kira's laugh was a rasp. "You should talk. I had cover. You didn't." His eyes flicked to hers briefly, something sparking there before he looked back down. "You shouldn't have been out there alone." "No choice," she murmured. "Command wanted scans. Raiders had other plans. And your backup?" She swallowed hard. The image of her squad flashed behind her eyes, bodies broken, screams cut short in static choked comes. Gone. The word was a blade twisting in her throat. Dex didn't press. He just applied another patch, the warmth of his fingers brushing her skin in a way that felt too deliberate to be entirely accidental. "You're strong," he said quietly. "Stronger than most humans I've met." "Adaptation," she replied, fighting the sudden tightness in her chest. "Novar blood runs hotter. Our world tries to kill us from birth." His lips curved faintly. "Sounds familiar." Their eyes locked. The hum of the environmental systems filled the silence, soft and steady, like the breath between storms. Kira became painfully aware of the closeness, the heat of his body radiating through his armor, the faint scent of metal, and something earthy clinging to his skin. He broke the moment first, sealing the medkit with a snap and rising to his feet. "You'll live," he said gruffly, though there was a flicker of something in his eyes that didn't sound like detachment. Kira pushed upright, testing her weight. The pain was there, but dulled, manageable. "Your turrets won't hold them long," she said, nodding toward the muted thump of cannon fire beyond the hull. "Then we make sure we don't need them for long." Dex reached for his rifle, sliding a fresh magazine home with a satisfying click. "Grab what you can carry. We've got work to do." She stared at him for a long breath, then bent to retrieve her weapon. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time since the ambush, Kira felt something bloom in the hollow where despair had lived. It wasn't hope. Not yet, but it was close. The turrets fell silent an hour later, their barrels glowing faintly. From overuse. Outside, smoke twisted in the rising heat as the last Rian body curled in death spasms. Kira watched the readout flicker green across Dex's console and allowed herself a slow, shaky breath. For now, the perimeter was clear, but it wouldn't stay that way. Rian packs hunted in layers kill one wave, and another would come sniffing the blood soon enough. She knew it, and judging by the tight line of Dex's jaw as he secured his rifle, so did he. "Ship's engines?" she asked, easing onto her feet, testing her patched side. Pain flared like a warning beacon, but it held. "Compromised," Dex said without preamble. He jerked his chin toward the aft section, where the propulsion diagnostics scrolled blood red. "They gutted my manifold before we scared them off." Can't break orbit until we rebuild half the drive. Best case? 2 days. 2 days. Out here. Kira's stomach sank like a stone. The raiders will regroup long before that. Dex didn't deny it. He just grabbed a sealed canteen from a wall rack and tossed it her way. She caught it on instinct, surprised by the weight and the faint frost clinging to its surface. Water. Real water. Drink, he said simply. She obeyed. Cool liquid. Shocking her throat. For one fleeting moment, the simple act of swallowing felt like victory. When she lowered the canteen, Dex was watching her calm, unreadable, but with something flickering behind his eyes. Something he didn't voice. "Why were you here, Dex?" she asked finally. Her tone was quiet, but carried the weight of a blade. Humans don't wander into restricted sectors for sightseeing. His gaze held hers for a beat before he turned, setting down his rifle with deliberate care. "Wasn't sightseeing," he said at last. "I was tracking someone. Krell. Rion. Warlord. Heard of him?" Kira's pulse skipped. "He's a ghost story the Corps tells rookies to keep them sharp." "Then your intel's outdated." Dex's voice hardened. "He's real. And he's hunting something." "What?" Instead of answering, Dex strode to a recessed locker and keyed in a code. The panel hissed open to reveal a compact scanning rig, half human, half something else. He flicked it on, and a pale blue holographic grid sprang to life, overlaying. A sector map. Energy spikes flared on the display, pulsing like distant stars. One in particular burned hotter than the rest, a jagged beacon throbbing deep in the eastern quadrant. Kira's breath caught. She knew that signature had crossed. Half a system chasing it. "Progenitor tech," she whispered. Dex nodded grimly. "The readings match fragments I've seen before, but this one." He zoomed in, the signal sharpening to a pinpoint inside a ruined complex. "This one's alive. Active." Kira stared at the projection, unease curling cold in her gut. "If Krell gets there first." "He won't," Dex cut in, his voice like iron. "Because we're going to beat him to it." She blinked. "You and me? I can barely walk, and your ship's a cripple. You want to charge into a ruin crawling with. Rayon's on the off chance we find a toy older than history?" Dex's smile was thin, humorless. "That toy could change everything. Krell wants it for a reason. I want it so he doesn't. And you," he held her gaze, "you came here for it too, didn't you?" Silence stretched between them, like a live wire. Kira hated how easily he read her, how naked the truth felt on her tongue. She could deny it, but what would be the point? "Fine," she said at last, voice like ground glass. "We do this fast, in and out before the Rayans regroup." Dex's answering nod was sharp, decisive. "Gear up, Lieutenant. We move at dawn." Dawn on this world wasn't gentle. It came like fire poured across the horizon, the twin suns clawing their way out of the dust-choked sky. The heat hit like a fist, even before they cleared the ship's hatch. Weapons slung, packs heavy with rations and sealant foam. The trek eastward cut through a wasteland of broken bones, collapsed arches, shattered spires, the skeletal remains of a civilization so far beyond them that even its ruins whispered arrogance. Progenitors built this? Dex asked once, eyes tracing the smooth curve of a toppled column. Kira nodded, scanning the shadows. Or what's left of them. They weren't architects. They were gods playing with matter like clay. Dex grunted, adjusting his rifle. Gods always fall. Hours later, the ruin rose from the haze, a carcass of black stone, fused with something stranger. A cathedral of curves that bent light where it touched. Vines as thick as power cables coiled through shattered windows, pulsing faintly as if alive. They stepped inside. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in an instant. The silence so complete Kira could hear the blood in her veins. Patterns crawled across the walls, glyphs that seemed to shift when she looked too long, whispering in the back of her mind. Not creepy at all, Dex muttered, his voice tight with awe. Kira barely heard him. Her scanner pulsed like a heartbeat, leading them deeper, through halls that bent back on themselves, into a chamber that stole her breath. The space was perfect, untouched. A dome of black glass and bone-white lattice, glowing faintly with captured light. At its center stood a pedestal, and upon it, the source of every signal, every death, every whisper that had drawn them across a dozen worlds. The artifact dot, it was small, no larger than Dex's hand, a sphere of interlocking rings orbiting a pulsing core of blue fire. Each motion sang in silence, a rhythm older than stars. Kira's mouth went dry. By the void, Dex stepped forward, slow, reverent. So that's what all the blood's for. Don't touch it, Kira warned, her voice sharp as a blade. Progenitor tech doesn't play by rules you understand. It could, but Dex's fingers were already curling toward the glow, and when they closed around the artifact, the room exploded in light. The blast didn't burn. It invaded. It ripped through the air like a living storm, hurling Kira against the wall as arcs of blue fire spider-webbed across every surface. Dex stood at the eye of it, his body rigid, head thrown back as energy crawled over his skin, sank into his veins, bled through his armor like molten veins of lightning. Dex! Kira lunged, only to be flung back by a force that wasn't air, wasn't matter, was something deeper, older. She could only watch as the artifact's rings spun faster, faster, then melted into his flesh, disappearing beneath his skin with a hiss that sounded almost like a sigh. The glow died. Silence crashed down. Dex dropped to one knee, panting, his eyes snapping open and glowing, not like fire, like infinity poured into mortal glass. Kira froze, pulse hammering in her throat. What did you do? Dex rose slowly, flexing his hands. The air trembled as shards of debris lifted from the floor, orbiting him like obedient moons. His smile was a knife of wonder and fear all at once. Not sure, he said, voice thrumming with a resonance that didn't belong to any human throat. His gaze locked on hers, a flicker of wild exhilaration igniting in its depths. But I think we just changed the rules. Asterisk. The silence after the blast was thick, humming with energy that had no right to exist. Dust drifted lazily through shafts of pale light, filtering from cracks above, but Kira barely saw it. Her focus was locked on Dex, the man who had walked into this ruin as a mercenary, and now stood like something more. His silhouette rippled, faintly like heat haze bending the air. Debris hovered weightless around him in a slow, hypnotic orbit, shards of obsidian, flecks of ancient alloy, fragments that once belonged to a world far older than theirs. His eyes burned with the same electric blue glow as the artifact, bright enough to leave afterimages when Kira blinked. What did you do? Her voice sounded alien to her own ears, low, harsh, almost drowned by the pounding of her hearts. Dex looked down at his hands as though seeing them for the first time. His fingers curled, and the orbiting fragments collapsed into a neat sphere, with a faint hump of displaced air. He exhaled slowly, a tremor running through his frame, and the pieces clattered harmlessly to the floor. I think. He swallowed, jaw tight, veins in his neck pulsing with a strange luminescent shimmer. I bonded with it. Kira's breath caught. Bonded? Her voice sharpened to a blade edge. Do you have any idea what that means? Progenitor tech isn't a tool. Dex, it's a predator. It uses you as much as you use it. His gaze lifted, calm despite the words trembling between them. Then I guess we'll have to see who's hungrier. She opened her mouth to argue, but the ground shuddered beneath their boots, silencing her. A deep, bone-vibrating boom rolled through the ruins, shaking dust from the high arches. Then came the second, louder, closer. Kira spun toward the corridor. They'd entered through, her scanner shrieking warnings in jagged pulses of red. Movement signatures. Dozens. Rayans, she hissed, her gut icing over. They found us. Dex didn't even flinch. He reached for his rifle, then stopped, staring at it like a man considering a relic of the past. We won't make it out. The way we came. Brilliant observation, Kira snapped, scanning the chamber for exits. There were 3, all leading toward converging signatures. They're surrounding us. Krell's not letting this prize slip. As if conjured by her words, a voice cut through the ruined silence, a voice that crawled like oil over stone, translated into standard, but still steeped in chitinous menace. Human. Kira's head snapped up. The warlord stepped from the far corridor, towering over his kin, a monstrosity of obsidian chitin fused with cold steel, mandibles slick with battle oil, cybernetic graphs gleaming under the dim light. His eyes burned with green fire as his massive frame moved with predatory grace. Behind him poured his warriors, 15, maybe more, their blades catching the glow like hungry teeth. Krell's mandibles clicked in something that might have been amusement. You carry what I seek, he rasped. How curious. Bet it chose you. Dex moved forward slowly, placing himself between Kira and the Rayans. The air thickened, humming as cracks of pale blue light spider-webbed faintly along. His armor. Funny thing, he said, his voice carrying an edge that made Kira's skin prickle. I'm not in a giving mood. Krell's chittering laugh reverberated through the chamber like breaking bones. Then you will die screaming. The warlord's arms snapped up. Energy flared. The world exploded. Plasma fire screamed from a dozen rifles. Kira dove behind a toppled column as the first salvo scorched the air where she'd stood. Stone vaporized in a blast of emerald heat. She returned fire in precise bursts, dropping 2 Rayans before her pistol whined dry. Cursing, she slammed. In her last cell, Dex didn't move. He didn't need to. The blast stopped 3 meters from him, arrested midair like insects in amber. Kira blinked, breath locking in her throat. The green plasma bolts hung suspended for one impossibly long heartbeat, then swiveled as if obeying an unseen command, and shot back. The chamber filled with shrieks as the redirected barrage tore through. The Rian front line, bodies convulsing in showers of ichor. Dex strode forward, eyes blazing, every motion fluid and terrifying. He flung out a hand, and 3 warriors slammed into the wall, so hard their exoskeletons cracked like glass. By the void, Kira whispered, but power had a price. She saw it in the tremor starting in Dex's shoulders, the ragged hedge to his breathing. Each gesture seemed to bleed something from him, even as his aura flared brighter, casting the chamber in pulses of blue fire. Dex! She shouted over the chaos, dropping another Rion with a headshot. You're burning too fast. Don't. His voice was hoarse, strained, but iron under the fracture. Stop me. Krell roared, shoving aside his own dead as he barreled forward. His cybernetic claws snapped open, spitting arcs of green lightning. He leaped 500 kilos of plated death and slammed into Dex with a shockwave that cracked the floor. The human staggered, dropping to one knee under the crushing force. Sparks screamed as Krell's claws carved into his shoulder plate, rending alloy like paper. Kira raised her pistol, fired once, twice, thrice, but the warlord's grafted carapace drank the shots like rain. Dex's roar split the air. Blue erupted, not light, not flame, but raw force. The shockwave hurled Krell across the chamber, his armored bulk smashing through a support column in a geyser of stone. Dex rose slowly, eyes incandescent, veins alive with cold fire dot, and then he swayed. Kira's heart seized. Dex! I can end this, he rasped. breath tearing at his throat. "But it'll kill me." "No." She lunged, grabbing his arm. His skin burned cold, his pulse a staccato drum under her fingers. "There's another way, there has to be." His hand cupped her cheek, fingers trembling, eyes blazing. "Like dying stars. You fought well, Kira," he whispered. "But I won't leave you alone." And then the world detonated. Blue light howled outward in a wave that erased sound. Erased thought, erased everything but its fury. It slammed into the rayons like a god's fist, vaporizing flesh, shattering alloy, grinding Krell into ruin. With a single perfect pulse. Stone screamed as the chamber convulsed, the ceiling fracturing under the impossible force. And at the eye of the storm, Dex stood, arms outstretched, light pouring from his skin like a dying sun. Then the glow flickered. He fell. Asterisk dust and silence settled like a funeral shroud across the ruin. The air still vibrated faintly, humming with the echo of what had just happened, raw power unleashed without restraint. Something older and hungrier than language tearing through the bones of a dead world. Kira staggered forward, boots crunching. Over shattered stone and the remains of Rion bodies. Smoke curled in ghostly tendrils around what had been Krell, a heap of twisted chitin and sparking cybernetics, crushed beyond recognition. His warlord's roar was gone now, replaced by the crackle of dying circuits. Asterisk. And in the center of the devastation, Dex lay sprawled like a broken statue. His armor was scorched black along the seams, vents hissing faint wisps of vapor. The glow that had devoured him moments ago was gone, leaving only a faint shimmer pulsing. Under his skin, like the last heartbeat of a dying star. "Dex!" The word tore from Kira's throat, raw and jagged. She dropped to her knees beside him, hands already moving, stripping away shattered plating, ignoring the blood streaking her own arms. His eyes fluttered open, dim now, gray peering through. The fading corona of blue. "You still alive," he rasped, lips quirking in something that might have been a smile. "Barely." Kira snapped, forcing the tremor from her voice as her fingers traced the outline of the artifact beneath his. Sternum a shape burned into his flesh, glowing faintly, feeding on what little strength remained in him. "Damn it, Dex, you weren't supposed to." He lifted a hand. Trembling, calloused fingers brushing her cheek in a gesture so gentle it nearly broke her. "Told you. I wouldn't leave you." Her hearts twisted painfully. No, Var didn't. Cry at least, not where anyone could see, but she felt the sting now, sharp as shrapnel. She pressed her forehead to his, closing her eyes against the raw heat building behind them. "Don't you dare die on me," she whispered. The artifact pulsed, a cold heartbeat against her palm, feeding, drinking him dry. Think, her mind raced, clawing through every scrap of Xenotech protocol she'd ever memorized. Progenitor devices responded to resonance, to harmonic keys embedded in frequency living frequency. She snatched up her wrist scanner, fingers flying across controls, until a jagged waveform bloomed on its cracked display. Match base frequency. Disrupt bond. "Come on," she muttered, recalibrating, tuning the pitch until the chamber quivered with a high, keening hum. Dex flinched violently, a strangled groan tearing from his chest. Blue light flared under his skin like fire trapped in glass. "Stay with me," Kira pleaded, voice breaking as she pressed the scanner to his chest, directly over the artifact's pulse. The device screamed, lights spiking crimson. For one agonizing heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the artifact convulsed. Light erupted, blinding and cold, ripping a cry from Dex as the thing tore free from his flesh in a cascade of blue sparks. It hovered for an instant above his chest, spinning wildly, as if reluctant to surrender its prize, then collapsed into a dark, dormant sphere inside the containment field. Kira slammed shut around it. The scanner flickered and died. Silence crashed in its wake. Kira dropped the device and pressed. Trembling fingers to Dex's throat. Pulse. Weak, thready, but there. His breathing hitched, shallow and uneven, but alive. Relief slammed into her so hard it stole her strength. She sagged over him, forehead brushing the curve of his jaw, drinking in the faint, steady rhythm of life beneath his skin. "You stupid, reckless, impossible human," she whispered. And for the first time since this nightmare began, a sound broke from her throat that might have been a laugh or a sob. Dex stirred, his voice rough silk against her ear. "You're welcome." She lifted her head slowly, meeting his gaze. The glow was gone, leaving only his gray eyes stormy, haunted, achingly human. Vulnerable in a way that cleaved something open inside her. Why? The question spilled out before she could stop it. Why risk everything? His fingers found hers, curling weakly but deliberately, heat bleeding into her skin. Because... His breath shuddered, catching on the edge of pain. Because somewhere between saving your ass and pissing you off, I started needing you, and I don't let go of what I need. The words struck harder than any plasma blast. Kira felt them like impact tremors, radiating through every armored wall she'd built. For a moment, she could only stare this man who should have been nothing more than a mission variable, now looking at her like she was gravity itself. On Novar, they called it soul binding. A myth, a story whispered to children about two beings who, against the cold mechanics of biology and war, found something deeper, something that made them stronger together than apart. She had never believed it. Until now. She bent slowly, her forehead resting against his, their breaths mingling in the ruined stillness. "Then hold on," she murmured, voice fierce as a vow. "Because I'm not letting go either." His lips curved faintly. "Guess we're both stubborn." "Guess so." Hours later, the ruin lay behind them, swallowed in shadow. Krell's body smoldered in silence, and the artifact sealed in Kira's containment field pulsed faintly, like an eye pretending. To sleep. Dex lay in the ship's medberth, color creeping back into his face as regenerative patches worked overtime. Kira stood by the viewport, the twin suns bleeding into a bruised horizon, stars pricking through like cold steel. The scanner on her wrist chimed softly. Data unfurled in pale blue sigils across the screen, progenitor code she shouldn't have been able to read. But now she could, because the artifact wanted her to, and the message it carried twisted ice into her gut. Phase 1 complete. Integration successful. Awaiting directive. Kira stared at the final glyph, her heart's thundering. A map blinked into view, lines arcing across the void to a single blue jewel suspended in black. Earth. Her breath left her in a whisper that tasted like fear. "Oh no." Behind her, Dex stirred, his voice soft, threaded with exhaustion. "What is it?" Kira turned slowly, the weight of a truth too big for words pressing against her lungs. "It wasn't about Krell," she said, her voice breaking like dry glass. "Dex, this wasn't an accident. The progenitors planned for you." His gray eyes fixed on hers, searching, and in their depths she saw the reflection of the storm to come. And for the first time since this began, Kira, terse soldier, survivor, cynic, felt the cold breath of something far worse than fear sliding down her spine. Not war, not extinction. Something older, smarter, and it had just woken up. The end.